What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to our channel where we discuss all things trucking. Today, we're going to dive into an important topic that negatively affects the entire transportation industry: double brokering. Over the course of this video, we'll go over what double brokering is, how it can be avoided, the consequences it brings, and the effects it has on the industry. If before we break all that down, you wouldn't mind tossing a thumbs up on this video and subscribing to our channel, that would be greatly appreciated. All right, let's get into it. First and foremost, what is freight brokering? In the transportation industry, when goods need to be transported, a shipper typically contacts a freight broker. The broker then acts as a middleman, connecting the shipper with a carrier who will transport the goods to their destination. The broker is responsible for negotiating rates, handling paperwork, and ensuring a smooth logistics process. However, as anyone who's spent some time in this industry knows, there are many times when unethical practices occur during this process, most notably double brokering. Double brokering is a deceptive practice that undermines the trust and integrity of the entire industry. It happens when a freight broker accepts a shipment from a shipper, but instead of directly assigning it to a carrier, they rebroker the load to another broker without the shipper's knowledge or consent. Essentially, it involves a middleman within a middleman, who both profit off of the transaction at the shipper's, carrier's, and consumer's expense. This practice can have detrimental effects on the overall efficiency of the supply chain. When a load is double brokered, it can lead to a lack of transparency and accountability in the transportation process. Multiple brokers involved in a single shipment can and often does result in confusion, miscommunication, and potential delays. It also opens the door for fraudulent activities and increases the risks for carriers and shippers alike. When a load is double brokered, often carriers don't receive the full payment for their services, and in some cases, carriers might not even be aware that they are involved in a double brokered transaction until issues arise. This not only affects their profitability, but can tarnish their reputation within the industry as well. Double brokering has become a real issue within the transportation industry. According to a recent Wall Street Journal article titled "Growing Freight Fraud is Peeling Millions from the US Shipping Market," this problem has reached alarming proportions, affecting both shippers and carriers. The Wall Street Journal report reveals that freight fraud has become a lucrative business, with criminals adapting and evolving their methods to exploit vulnerabilities within the system. One data point presented in the article states that fraudulent freight schemes in the US cost the shipping industry more than $50 million in 2022 alone, according to complaints filed with the Federal Trade Commission. This staggering figure emphasizes the magnitude of the problem and the urgent need for action. The article highlights how fraudsters often establish fictitious companies or assume the identity of legitimate carriers and brokers. They create an illusion of credibility to gain the trust of shippers and carriers. Once the goods are in transit, these fraudulent actors vanish, leaving shippers and carriers with substantial financial losses. As the article quotes a representative from a leading industry association, "They are experts at disguising their true intentions until they have your freight in their possession." The rising trend of freight fraud not only impacts the financial well-being of carriers and shippers, also affects the broader economy. As the article points out, increased freight costs resulting from fraud-related losses can have a ripple effect, ultimately burdening consumers with higher prices for goods and services. Load boards play a crucial role in the freight industry, acting as a platform for connecting shippers and carriers. However, an article titled "Load Boards Are Broken, Fixing Them is Critical" from FreightWaves highlights some significant issues with these platforms. According to the article, load boards have become a hotbed for double brokering and other fraudulent practices. The lack of robust verification processes and the ease of entry into the system make load boards vulnerable to exploitation by dishonest actors. The article argues that these platforms need urgent attention and improvements to address the growing freight fraud problem. One of the key issues raised in the article is the prevalence of quote-unquote phantom loads on load boards. These are fictitious loads created by fraudsters to entice carriers into bidding on them. Once a carrier secures a load, the fraudster disappears, leaving the carrier with an empty promise and potential financial losses. This not only wastes the carrier's time and resources, but also erodes trust in load boards as a reliable source of freight opportunities. Furthermore, the article emphasizes the lack of transparency and accountability in load board transactions. Many load boards operate without proper oversight or regulations, making it easier for unethical brokers and carriers to engage in fraudulent activities. This lack of accountability exacerbates the problem of double brokering and puts both carriers and shippers at risk. The article also suggests that load boards should adopt more stringent vetting processes and verification mechanisms. Implementing mandatory identity verification, carrier qualification checks, and rating systems for brokers and carriers can help filter out bad actors and enhance the overall integrity of load board platforms. By ensuring that only legitimate and trustworthy parties have access to the system, load boards can become a more reliable and secure resource for the industry. So how can carriers tell if someone is double brokering? As carriers navigate the freight industry, it is crucial for them to be able to identify potential instances of double brokering. Detecting double brokering can help carriers avoid becoming unwitting participants in fraudulent transactions. Here are some key indicators that carriers can look out for. Inconsistent documentation. Carriers should carefully review the documentation provided for a load. If they notice discrepancies between the broker's paperwork and the shipper's documentation, it could be a red flag. In cases of double brokering, the carrier might receive paperwork from a broker other than the one they initially engaged with. Next up, unexpected payment delays. If carriers experience unexpected delays in receiving payment for their services, it could be an indication of double brokering. When loads are double brokered, the payment process can become more complex, leading to payment delays or incomplete payments altogether. Also, lack of direct communication. Carriers should pay attention to their communication channels. If they primarily interact with a broker and have limited or no direct contact with the shipper, it could be a sign of double brokering. Direct communication with the shipper is essential for verifying the legitimacy of the transaction. Also, unusual load reassignments. Carriers should be wary if a load they initially agreed to transport suddenly gets reassigned to another broker without their knowledge or consent. Such unexpected load reassignments can be a strong indication of double brokering. Also, researching brokers. Carriers can perform due diligence on the brokers they work with, conducting background checks, reading reviews, and seeking recommendations from trusted sources. Lastly, trusting your instincts. Carriers should be able to trust their instincts and be cautious if something feels off about a transaction. If a deal seems too good to be true, or if they encounter suspicious behavior, it is essential to exercise caution and investigate further. By remaining vigilant and attentive to these indicators, carriers can minimize the risk of falling victim to double brokering and protect themselves from potential financial losses and reputation damages. But what policies could be put in place to combat double brokering? To combat the issue of double brokering and enhance the integrity of the freight industry, implementing effective policies and regulations is essential. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, or FMCSA, is actively considering petitions on rulemakings that aim to address this problem. A recent article from FreightWaves highlights that the FMCSA is seeking public comment on a proposal to eliminate bad actor brokers from the industry. This proposal aims to establish stricter regulations and qualifications for brokers, ensuring that only reputable and trustworthy entities can operate as brokers. One potential policy that could be implemented is the requirement for brokers to obtain a license or verification from the FMCSA. This would involve a thorough vetting process that assesses the broker's financial stability, track record, and adherence to ethical standards. By implementing licensing requirements, the industry can create a barrier to entry for fraudulent brokers and provide carriers and shippers with a trusted pool of intermediaries to work with. The article also mentions the need for increased transparency in load board transactions. Load boards could be required to verify the identity and legitimacy of both brokers and carriers before allowing them to participate on the platform. This could involve conducting background checks, verifying insurance and authority information, and implementing rating systems that reflect the credibility and performance of brokers and carriers. Additionally, the FMCSA could consider consider enforcing stricter penalties and sanctions for brokers found guilty of double brokering or engaging in fraudulent activities. Imposing significant fines, suspensions, or even revoking broker authority for repeated offenses would serve as a deterrent and reinforce the seriousness of the issue. Furthermore, establishing a centralized database or system where carriers can report incidents of double brokering and fraudulent behavior would be beneficial. This would enable real-time sharing of information and help carriers and shippers make informed decisions when they're engaging with brokers. Ultimately, a combination of comprehensive licensing, enhanced verification processes, transparency requirements, stricter penalties, and improved reporting mechanisms can significantly limit double brokering and protect carriers and shippers from falling victim to fraudulent activities. With all this said, we'd love to hear what you think. Have you ever encountered a suspicious or fraudulent transaction in your trucking career? If so, how did you handle it? Also, what additional measures do you think can be implemented to prevent double brokering and enhance transparency in the industry? Lastly, have you had any positive experiences with load boards? What steps do you think can be taken to improve their credibility and security? Also, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more trucking insights, and we'll catch you on the next one.